Welcome to Make Your Mark podcast, where guests share their experiences, insights, and tactics to help you accelerate your business. So building, scaling, and monetizing your business is made easier. And I will be your host, Kay Suthar. Welcome back to Make Your Mark podcast. I'm your host, Kay Suthar, and oh my goodness, do I have an incredible guest for you today. With dual chops in comedy and advertising, Hersh Rephun has enjoyed an electric career spanning 2 decades as a message therapist and as a stand-up comedian playing gigs across the country. Empathy and accessibility are the hallmark of his work. He hosts the popular Truth Tastes Funny podcast, seeking survival tips for a chaotic world, and is following it up with Yes Brand, helping founders and CEOs tackle branding challenges with humor and humanity. His clients include change makers, market leaders, agencies, institutions, production companies, and Oscar-winning filmmakers. As a brand storyteller, he operates on one simple principle, and that's sell the truth. Please welcome to the stage, Hersh Rephun. Oh my goodness, I am super excited to have you on the show.
That was wonderful, dear. Now, let's try it again, and we're going to eliminate all the multisyllabic words. So anything with more than one syllable we'll just put aside. Just use the single syllables. Okay, I didn't mean. See, again, the accent just pops up, and it's not intentional. And you're listening as though it's not strange when I do that.
No, you know what it is? I've got so used to it now.
Yeah.
I'm like, every time I speak to Hersh, this is what's going to happen.
Right. So it's not a surprise.
No, I'm not surprised at all. But Hersh, oh my goodness, like, you are the master when it comes to brands, right?
Oh, thank you.
And messaging and all of that good stuff. And you do add comedy to everything that you do, which is why I absolutely love you and want to walk around with you on my phone in my pocket all day long, right? Because I know it's going to be so entertaining. But before we get to the nitty-gritty and learn a little bit more about what messaging means, what Yes Brand means, and what your podcast is all about. You're doing so many different things, and you've done so many different things. How did you end up with the business that you have today? What was your journey like?
Well, first of all, Kay, thank you so much for having me on. This is great. It's great to be in this setting with you, and we spend a lot of time together, and it's wonderful to have this rapport that we have already. So it's interesting because where I'm at now with Yes Brand is a culmination of everything else that I've done in my life. And that's very intentional because we never really know. We don't know everything we're going to do. We don't know what job we're going to have. We may have a certain field we like, but maybe it won't work out for whatever reason, or some other opportunity comes along. So I used to try to shape my destiny or fulfill my destiny. And what I realized was there were things that I couldn't control. And, I started a family. I was very young when I started a family and all this stuff. So I was like, okay, well, my first love was the theater, was acting and doing stand-up comedy, which I did in my early 20s when I lived in New York. Then when my first wife and I were having our first child, going on the road as a stand-up comic would be really, really complicated. And so I got a job in advertising. It wasn't like I had really thought about being in advertising. But when I was in School of Visual Arts in New York, which I had done primarily to hone my skills as a writer, the chairman had said to me, "Oh, you should take an advertising course because you could sell a line on a piece of paper. You're a great salesman and you should work in advertising." Right. I said, "Oh, but I want to do movies and comedy." And he's like, "Yeah, of course, but whatever." So I took the class. That's how I got that job. And then I got that job in advertising. And then I would always try to scratch my way back to comedy, whether I would like audition for a commercial or do a voiceover or one of my clients, because my clients all produced commercials and did things like that. But it always seemed like I was straddling two separate worlds. Like stand-up would be that life of being in a smoky nightclub, and then the other thing is you're in a boardroom. And I eventually realized that my knack is for hearing the voice of the brand and helping them express it in a way that comedians and other performers and other people who are very natural on stage do. Because you get a CEO and put them on a stand-up stage, and they'll freeze most of the time. Right. Or they might have a great personality, but not know exactly how to organize their thoughts the right way. It's not everybody's a performer. So I just use that skill as a writer, as a performer, as a storyteller to hone brand messages. And the thing that comedy and advertising have in common is that they're both based on truth. You can't have either one be successful without the truth. Comedy doesn't exist in a vacuum with no reality around it to offset it and give it perspective. And advertising is not going to be effective if you're just full of baloney.
Right.
So that's the common denominator. And I finally realized, I think I like both of these things as much as the other. I'm not trying to escape one for the other. Right. And I tried them each separately. So I'm like, well, now let me just be me and get to know me a little better. That's what I did during the pandemic. I was like, okay, well, let me just get to know myself a little better and see what I really, really want to do, because something's missing, something isn't clicking, and I'm missing out on something.
Wow. Okay. So it has been quite a journey for you. And I like the fact that, you've got these two passions. And instead of picking one or the other, you decided, oh, heck, I'm going to put both of them together and build a business around it. Right? Because
yeah.
I feel like one of the things that people, I guess, misunderstand or not too sure about is you got to pick one. And they stumble as to, okay, how am I going to build this business that I want to absolutely love, but having to pick one of my passions and not do both? Now, you mentioned that both, humor, comedy, and marketing, they both have a commonality when it comes to telling the truth, right? Yeah. And reaching people when it comes to telling the truth. How did you come about that idea that this was the link that meets each one of those passions together?
Well, it came through getting better at stand-up comedy and analyzing that as a science. So it's really funny because in advertising, we deal with data, we deal with programming, and we deal with focus groups. You get kind of bored and desensitized to that. And with comedy, you think I'm free, I'm out there, I can do whatever I want, but there's a science to setups, punchlines, tags, the whole idea of what makes something work. And as I analyzed stand-up comedy, this was maybe 10 years ago, like I was getting back into it and I was missing it. And my friends wanted to try it. So a bunch of us did it, and we started going to do clubs every week. And we all became professional comedians, which is pretty amazing. There was 4 of us, and 3 of them had never done it ever in their lives. They all ended up being like working to the point where you could get paid to be in a show, comedians.
Oh, wow.
And what I learned, and one of them was a scientist. That's why we got this whole science process. What I learned was the role that truth plays in it, the amount of truth that usually appears in various jokes and various things. And I was like, oh, well, in advertising, the hardest thing to do is to win the trust of the consumer. And that's because you sound like you're lying, or you are lying, or you're lying to yourself. There's a lot of different kinds of lying, and they're not all ill-intended. Sometimes they just happen, and it doesn't. So you have to get your story straight. You have to know who you are as a brand, and you have to do all these things. And then you mix the creativity into it, and the storytelling and the nuance and the production and the acting and the spokespeople, the influencers. So they're different ingredients, but the concept is the same. You have to find that core truth, find that honesty, and then lead with that. So sometimes it's comedy and advertising too, which is great, but not everything Not everything has to be funny.
Right. So what are the common mistakes that you have found, right? Well, whilst working in comedy and marketing and building a messaging and building people's brands that people keep tripping over again and again and again? What kind of mistakes what do they look like?
I would say second guessing the consumer is the same as not observing your audience, not checking the room. They go ahead and stand up is like you're checking out the room. You're about to go on and you're watching the audience and they're laughing at certain things and and you see what kind of crowd it is. And I went on stage once and I saw what kind of crowd it was. It was a very kind of rough and tumble, almost like there was a lot of like people that you wouldn't want to meet in an alley, like people but they were rowdy and they were having fun. But it was a like a road bar. It was like really not a place you would ordinarily perform, but there was a show there and it was wild and raucous and stuff. And it was like I started doing stuff that wasn't really for them, because I wanted to try it out, because I knew it was really good, because it had worked well last night in West Hollywood. Right. And I felt safe. And so I didn't go big with them. Okay. And they were like shouting at me because I had done an impression of Scarface. And then they were like, from the Al Pacino movie, and they loved that. Then I went on to some British thing or some other thing, and they were like, more Scarface. And, wow. And you realize, I didn't listen to them. Well, brands do the same thing sometimes. Mm. They read all the research, but they don't really listen to what the consumer's saying because they're so wrapped up in what they're selling. They're like, I'm going to make this consumer get it. They're going to get it. I'm going to say it this way. I'm going to say it that way. It's like, well, maybe they don't want to get it. Maybe they want something different, and you have to listen to them and trust yourself, which goes back to that truth thing. So the biggest mistake is a lack of trust of the audience, usually. Like you say, so now that we've talked through it for an hour and a half, the shorter way would have been for me to say, well, you don't always come up with the right words right away. The shorter way to say it would have been that you, if you're worried that your audience doesn't trust you, you have to learn to trust them first. So.
Okay. So that's interesting that you mentioned that, because a lot of the time people say, people aren't buying from me. Maybe they're not my audience, right? Maybe I need to look at another clientele. And the fact that when you was a comedian, you're going on these different stages, you had different people in front of you. They weren't the same people. Is that the same for when you're kind of niching down and looking at your clientele in your business, that maybe you shouldn't be niching down to one set of clients, that you need to be providing your service, your product to a broader range of audiences?
That's very insightful, Kay, because that is what happened. I had been working a lot in the footwear industry, the sneaker business.
Right. Do you know what, Hersh? What haven't you done? That might have been the quicker question.
I've never been a nurse, and I've never operated in a proper theater. But I have done a lobotomy, and haven't heard any complaints. So,
oh my goodness.
But anyway, but it still was in marketing and advertising, but it happened to be for a niche of sneakers. Mm. And I was doing that for quite a while. And then you get to know everybody in that business. And then you feel like you're ingrained in the business. Now your category, and they say, well, what's your specialty? You say sneakers. But really that's wrong, because the specialty was, how do I help challenger brands, brands that are new, brands that are newer, brands that can't get to the next level? How do I help them compete with the big, giant established brands? That's really what I had been doing all those years. Right. But that was something I was missing. I was thinking sneakers. Oh, I work with this. And it's sneakers. Well, it has nothing to do with sneakers. So we sometimes put ourselves in the wrong box. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't be in some kind of box, have some kind of specialty. It means that we're misreading our own specialty.
Okay. And so if we're misreading it, because I guess sometimes when you're, kind of in your own head, you don't get to see the different perspectives, right? We don't get to understand or realize how people are perceiving us. And sometimes it can be in a better light than we perceive ourselves.
For sure, yeah.
And so what should we do to prevent falling in that trap? And so we're providing the best products and services and the messaging that we put out there to the best of our abilities to help our audience understand what we do. So in order to avoid falling in that pitfall that we're not getting our messaging out there the way our audience needs to hear it from us.
Right. What's the best way to avoid sending the wrong message or not sending the right message? Well, the simple answer is that the right message is the one that is the most accurate about you. So in other words, rather than saying, okay, I would like to sell to X, you know yourself well enough to say, okay, here's why I started this. Go back to your why, because people always talk about how important that is, but they don't always talk about it in terms of, like the people I work with, which are brands, which are often, and as we know, there are personal brands, and I work with those too, but, consumer goods, cars, travel, things like that. They really have to get personal a little bit. That's why I deal mostly with CEOs, founders, certainly leadership roles, because they're the ones that have the power to say, this is why I'm doing this. So if they ask themselves why I'm doing it, they're going to find they're going to match it up with the consumer. Then if they follow my previous advice, which is listen to the consumer, because we kind of skipped that step. We assumed that the consumer was ready.
Right.
So what you did was bring us back around to the first step, which is the first step is know yourself, right? Find yourself before you brand yourself.
Right.
And then brand yourself. But now that you found yourself, now you know who your people are. Now you know who your customers are. Now don't just shout at them. Now listen to them. Listen to them. And focus groups are one tool, but now we have so many ways at our disposal to be amongst people.
Yeah.
Fortunately, in reality too, and not just virtually, we can be now amongst people more. That's why I love experiential marketing. I love event marketing. I love anything that's interactive.
Yeah.
Even if it's audiovisual and it's interactive and it's gaming. But I love interactive marketing because I think it really gives us a chance to get to know the customer better. And that is something I learned in footwear, where we would do pop-up stores. We would do pop-up stores and we'd take a storefront for a week and do something fun. It could be anything. We had a brand called Mephisto, which is a very well-known brand in Europe, but they have a Mephisto USA. We were doing all the marketing to introduce one of their classic styles in the United States, to reintroduce a classic style. And we did a pop-up where the whole thing with Mephisto is that they are amazingly comfortable, but people hadn't thought of them as being cool or badass. But they had a line that was coming out that really was. It just needed to be exposed to the people who, could buy it.
Right.
And so we came up with, instead of saying Mephisto's a great walking shoe, we came up with the line Mephisto Walks, which had like a walk the walk kind of a feel. And we did all these badass videos of showing cool people in Mephistos doing cool things, including like parkour and all kinds of stuff. And then at the event, we had a treadmill with a green screen, and they could put on Mephistos and they could walk on the treadmill, and the backgrounds would be put in after the fact, and we would send them the video. And it made perfect sense. It was Mephisto Walks. And here you have guests actually walking in Mephisto. And then for a week, they're coming in and checking it out and trying it on. And you're standing there getting their feedback. How was it? How did it feel? So in a way, you're being the salesman. You're not actually physically selling the shoes. You're really marketing them. You don't have that pressure like we've talked about before. You don't have that pressure about saying, Well, they're $300. You don't have to say anything. I don't know what it is, whatever they call here. You're in that luxury position of being able to give away some of the product,
Right.
but at the same time, you're getting this honest feedback, and then you feel like you really know the customer. And then if the customer tells you something you didn't know, you go to the owners of the brand. You say, listen, they love this, they don't love that.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is, look, if you want to start a business and a company, really want to get your brand out there, you need to start going out there and start communicating and talking to people and finding out what it is that they need, so you can implement those kind of items or systems or whatever it is into your business. That's how you're going to get people to buy your products and service, if you actually provide the solution, like you mentioned earlier as well, to whatever problem that they're having.
Yeah, it's a solution. Everything is solution based. That's a great way to look at every business. Everything is a solution.
Now, Hersh,
yeah.
I mean, you are a big people person, right? You love talking to people, no matter what accent it is. You love talking to people.
That's
right?
true. Yes.
And so, what would you say to that person that's like, oh my goodness, no, I'm an introvert. I can't talk to people. I can't go out there and speak to strangers. I've got to sit here and wait for them to come to me.
That I would say, since we're talking so much about listening, I think that a lot of people worry so much about what they're going to say that they're not even listening to what the person is telling them. Now, granted, you can't stand there for an hour and say nothing, but the more you listen, that person is literally giving you ideas of how to break the ice with them. They're literally feeding it to you if you're willing to take it. And if you've been at parties, and I'm sure you've been a party to conversations where somebody was talking, somebody was sharing, and someone else just is throwing out their own like completely non-related garbage about what they want to get across. Mm-hmm. And that person may be boisterous, unafraid, unabashed, but completely irritating. Whereas the person who's more shy, if they listen, don't worry about your shyness. Don't try to think of something to say when there's an opening, because while you're doing that, you're not listening. Mm-hmm. And listen, and then whatever hits you. And if you start listening and you're staring off, and the person is like, wow, this is a kind of weirdo, not even talking there. Are you is something wrong? Are you okay? And rather than be like totally intimidated, you go, no, I was just thinking about what you said about getting your master's, and I was thinking how amazingly hard that must have been to work full time and go to school for 3 years and get your master's. And you think that person's going to be insulted? They're going to love it. Yeah. They're going to say, you know what? I really appreciate your empathy,
And Jen, the one thing that I noticed that you didn't say was you don't stand there or sit there and talk about yourself all day long.
Right.
Right? Yeah. That's the number one thing, because I find that, and I don't know about you, but people tend to go down that road, right? If they get nervous, they don't know what to say. All they want to do is start talking about themselves. And Hersh, just like when you're dating and go on a date and the other person, all they do is talk about themselves, you tend to just switch off. You don't want to know anymore.
Yeah.
Right? And so you don't want to do that when you're networking, when you're talking to clients. You want to make sure you stick to helping them resolve the solution, like you mentioned.
Yeah. And if they talk long enough, you will get and also if they talk long enough, you'll get a sense of who they are. And if they aren't actually curious about you at all, then really this conversation is never going to go anywhere. No. You know what I mean? Like if someone's really interested, let's say that someone tells me all about their factory that they opened in Europe and everything they're producing and how amazing it's going. But I just nod, and then I ask, and then I'm listening. And then I ask them a question like, oh, are the taxes high there? Or oh, how many did you sell ultimately? Or, what, just to show them you're engaged, let's say. And then they're done. They got out everything. They're likely going to feel that thing of, so what do you do? Now they've asked you, you didn't put out anything. They asked you what you do.
Yeah.
Now you can more comfortably say, the one thing I will say is that the humility is really important and really great, but be humble, be more humble when people know who you are, and more confident, which doesn't mean braggadocious or obnoxious, but more confident when you're the only one who knows who you are. Right. So when they say, if let's say they know that you're the CEO of a company and they know that you just were on the cover of Time magazine, and they go, what do you do? And you say, oh, I'm on the cover of Time. I think you know who I am, then you come off like an idiot. If they say, oh, what do you do? But they just don't know that you're the person who's on Time, who's on the cover of Time. You say, I do whatever. My business partner in the footwear agency side of things owned a chain of sneaker stores. And so when people would come up to him at some of these big events, but didn't know who he was, and they would say, oh, what do you do? He would say, I sell shoes. And that always taught me in a way that was so humble. And someone else would say, oh, you know who that is? That's so-and-so. But the idea of I sell shoes was like, yeah, because there's 1,000 people are in this room who will tell that person who that guy is. So when people all around you don't know who you are, then muster the confidence and sell the truth. Say who you really are.
I like
that. But don't hold back. Don't think, oh, I don't want to sound like a blowhard, or I don't want to. No, you are in that situation. You have to be your biggest fan, but you'll know when to pull it back. You have to eventually pull it back.
Definitely. Now, I mean, I'm loving all this stuff that you're talking about, and just being you, being down to earth is what you're saying that you need to be, right? Being authentic.
Yeah.
Now, your business is called the Yes brand, right? Tell us a little bit about what that means and how the name came up.
Okay, so this again throws back to comedy, and that's intentional in that this was my realization that I needed to marry comedy and branding. Oh. So in the improv world, improvisational comedy, there's a rule called yes and the rule is set up so that it keeps if you've ever watched an improv comedy show, people throw ideas around and they say all kinds of crazy things. Now, if one scene partner throws out a crazy thing like the Martians have landed, and the scene partner gets intimidated by that and says, no, they haven't. Well, it's over. The whole scene is over. But in improv, the rule is you have to always say yes. And then you accept their offer. So their offer in comedy isn't an offer like I'm selling my service. An offer in comedy is, the Martians have landed. That's what I have to offer. And I would have to say to that, yes. And they're all wearing Prada suits. That's like the thing that they're doing. And then the other person would say, yes. And they all fit really, really tight, and you can see their. So it's like but you see how it can go on and build up, and the fun of accepting that new reality is what it's all about. So it is with Yes Brand, where my attitude was the brand. I don't live in a vacuum. I'm not going to come up with a great campaign knowing nothing about who the client is and why they started their company and what they're trying to accomplish and how they want to affect positive change in their lives in the world or whatever they want to do. So I have to have them say to me, oh, I want to do this. I'm this. This is who I believe this is what we've been facing. This is the thing. And I say yes. And so Yes Brand is always building on what the client has established and respecting that while adding something to it that they would not have come up with themselves.
Oh my goodness. So it's almost like you're a magician, right? You make this one, then you come up with different ideas, different branches they could go in, right, to make this even bigger and better for them and their clients.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very wonderful and lyrical way of putting it. It's a very magical, wonderful way to say it. But yeah, and that's the fun of it. That's why it is fun, because you're marrying reality and creativity and truth and humor and irony and perspective and goals and all of this stuff, but you're putting everything together with a very basic premise that you're gonna make it better. You're gonna make it sharper, clearer, better, more fun, more unusual, because I hear that so often that that they don't stand out. Everything, our website sounds like everybody else, our product sounds like everybody else. I'm this special person. Like I literally have had people, I've done this and I've done that, and yet when I put it on paper, it just sounds like a bunch of BS.
Right.
And that's where this relationship starts quite often.
Yes. And people need to be making their mark to this world, and it all starts with branding and making sure their messaging is put out there to the world in the right way. And I love the fact that you use humor. Not a lot of people use humor when building their brand, but we all know when you use humor, it actually builds more relatability.
Yeah.
Right? People relate to that. People love going to comedy shows. People want to laugh, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that, Hersh, you come from a comedy background, I know, right? And I know you personally, that it's so much fun to work with a coach like yourself, right? Because you bring so much humor, not just to business, but generally with every single person you come across. Every time I speak with you, I know that I am going to be laughing in tears, rolling on the floor. I know it every time. And I know it, especially when I turn up and, into these calls on Zoom, that at some point you're going to be dropping those British accents at some point. I know it now.
Most likely it's going to happen. But the fact that's almost, and I appreciate your saying that, Kay. And but the truth is that it is a great icebreaker. Comedy is often all that I have. I've been in social situations. I don't walk into every room, and my personality is not that alpha personality that walks into the room and throws the doors open and says, look at me. I have the same insecurities that anybody else has. What I eventually rely on quite often is the sense of humor to break through, but it has to be at the right time and place. That's why I feel like with brands, I have a good sense of that. If you look at some comedy advertising, sometimes it's very off the mark. It's not right it's not the right tone. Maybe it's offensive, or it's offensive in the wrong way. It's not offensive in a funny way. It's not, jokey enough. It's too jokey. So all of that stuff is like stuff we have to navigate. And I learned that stuff, navigating it in bars and in schoolyards and on all those things. And yeah, I got my ass kicked a couple of times, but I learned not a lot. I didn't get in fights a lot. It helped me avoid fights quite a bit.
And it's so funny you mentioned this, and you just reminded me of this. I wasn't going to bring this up, but you just reminded me of what happened to me when I had to use humor, right, to prevent my fear from showing up, right? And the first time I got on stage, right, and all I had to do was introduce myself, and I forgot my name. Hersh, I forgot my name, and I just stood there, and it was a live event with like 100 people, and I forgot my name, and I had my team behind me saying, "Tell them your name is Kay. Say it's Kay." And
it's a good team. Good to have that team.
Right? And then...
What's her name?
I know.
Tell us her name. It's Kay.
And so after that, I was humiliated.
Yeah.
Right? In front of everybody, the audience, my team. And I was like, I'm never going to let this happen again. And so when I went up there the next time, I used humor as my security blanket.
Yeah.
Right? And started saying maybe very silly things. And I guess the number one thing that people laugh at is my accent, because most of the audience were based in the US, right?
Right.
And so the minute I did this, oh my God, it was like I unlocked something. So many more people relate to you if you can make them laugh. If you can bring that emotion out, right? And they want to work with you. They want to know more. They're most likely to approach you and learn more about what you do, what your business is about, because of how you made them feel.
Right. Here's one more kind of rule or trick of comedy to keep in mind, which is that it's not just sharing the nervousness that you have with your audience. In other words, by making jokes and you're being funny and you're being real with them, so they get that, you know, you're just as nervous as they are, but it gives them, they're getting the release. When they laugh at you, they're releasing tension for both of you. You're pulling back the arrow, and then you let go with the punchline or the joke or whatever it is, and they let out the laughter, and they're releasing their tension. So you're calming them down by letting them see that you're also human. And by the way, what I've done is, you had that problem with, you know, so what I do is this: I just have this, and then when I walk out on, I have my name written on my hand, and that way I'll never forget it.
Well, ever since that time, I've never forgotten my name again.
Yeah. So you don't need it. You don't need to write it down.
But that's a good tip for anyone that is thinking of getting on stage and speaking. Write it on your hand.
Write it on your hand.
Just remember to look at your hand.
Right? Yeah, that's right. That's right. I can't remember my name.
Yeah, if you got your palms outwards, that's
right. That's if I were doing this as a film, that would be the thing. He goes, "Oh God!" She says, "Write your name on your hand next time," and then he puts it on, and he goes, "Oh God!" Oh, hello. This is Hersh. I'm here.
Now, Hersh, we're coming to the end of this episode. It's been so much fun speaking with you, learning so much. You've given us so many golden nuggets. But do you have any last words for our audience?
I've got nothing else. You've taken it all. Okay. Well, all right. In summation, what I would say is that it's hard to intellectualize this, I know, and all the things we tell ourselves, I'm not going to do this or I'm not going to do that. We give ourselves all like kinds of lessons and advice all the time. But the honest truth is that there is nothing to fear. And the fear that we have, the stage fright, the fear that we're going to offend somebody, and they may take offense, which we can't control. But if our intent is pure and our goals are pure, the purity of soul, right, really is all that matters. So just as we can't make everybody in the world love us or like us, nor should we even try, if we do work on ourselves and we're always trying to improve a little bit, and we're always trying to do the right thing in whatever situation, but know that it's not, look out at the world, it's not all going well. Everything isn't going to always go well. So there's nothing to fear in putting yourself out. There's nothing to fear. It's all just an experiment. And I don't think we can point at anyone who's never gotten it wrong and never had the beaker blow up in their face. You know, it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Something's going to happen. It's going to go wrong. And when it does, sit in that moment and tell yourself, oh, this is what I've been waiting for. This is the failure you forgot your name. You put out your hand like that. The audience saw that you wrote your name on your hand. And now you feel, and this is what you learn from stand-up, and you didn't plan it actually. And now you feel like an idiot. And what do you do? You're going to be like, I'm an idiot. And just see how people laugh and people relax, and you'll see that exhale. That's the worst thing that can ever happen, is that you're an idiot and everybody sees it. And now there's no more pressure and there's no more pretense. And now it's like, wait, in 5 minutes, it's your turn. Now the next person, and they'll know that it's true. You say to the person who's in front of you, okay, you're next. And they'll know, yeah, I am next. So
awesome.
There's nothing to fear but being the next person to look like an idiot.
Right. And the thing is, it doesn't matter because when you're getting vulnerable, more people are going to want to approach you, learn more about you. You're going to be more relatable.
Yes.
Right?
And that's what we all want. People coming over, being curious.
Yes,
so,
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I know, Hersh, at this point, people are thinking, oh my goodness, how do I get hold of Hersh? How do I speak with him and learn more? So where can they go to learn more about you, Hersh?
Well, they can go to my website, HershRephun.com, which is HershRephun. They can always reach out to me on the contact page there. They can follow my podcast as well, TruthTastesFunny.com. They can also reach out to me through the podcast, and YesBrandMethod.com. And then if that weren't enough, then we could go to GetMessageTherapy.com. I always try to come up with a URL that's easy to write down, that you wouldn't have to really remember so well or even write correctly.
Right.
There's some more advice.
I'm sure people appreciate that for sure.
I hope so.
Now, guys, all the links that Hersh mentioned will be in the show notes. So if you've missed it or you're not too sure, make sure you scroll down and check out the show notes. Go ahead and reach out to Hersh. Go and learn more about what he does and go and listen to his podcast. I have been listening to it the last few days and oh my goodness, it is hilarious. It is not a lie that he uses humor in everything that he does, and it's absolutely awesome because it keeps you wanting to listen to more and more episodes. So go and check it out, guys. Again, the links will be in the show notes. Go and reach out to him. Hersh, thank you so much for coming on to the show. So many golden nuggets in such a short amount of time. Wow.
My pleasure, Kay. Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
Thanks for listening to Make Your Mark podcast at www.makeyourmarkpodcast.com. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get this and every other episode that comes out. We have lots of great stuff coming, so make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss it. And thank you in advance for all the reviews and comments. I appreciate it so much. And I look forward to serving you in next week's episode.